Rory Robertson, Macquarie Bank. Mr Fraser, a bit over 2 decades ago, before you were Reserve Bank Governor, you were Treasury Secretary. Today's Treasury Secretary, Dr Henry, is looking at the Australian tax system with a view how it could be improved. Do you have any thoughts on how Australia's income and capital gains tax systems might be improved for the general benefit of the Australian economy and Australian people in general?
Thanks, Rory. I do have some views, but they don't count for anything these days, I'm afraid. But Ken's got enough wood on him without putting more wood on him. But I would hope that various things will come out of the review, and one of those things I'm hoping will relate to the coordination of policies generally, that is to turn to fiscal policy to supplement monetary policy as appropriate, rather than leave monetary policy to bear the burden of dealing with asset price booms, for example, when if one was able to drum up the political courage, some changes to tax measures would be a more effective way of heading off some of those booms. That involves, for example, changing things like the rates of capital gains tax, and dare I mention it again, negative gearing. I helped persuade Paul Keating to move in that direction once, and the measure was in place for a short term before it was rescinded, and Paul Keating hasn't forgiven me ever since. But more basically, Rory, I'm hoping that the tax review will start by being producing a fairer tax system. Fairness seems to me something that everyone pays lip service to but then forgets to do much about. And I'm old enough to have old-fashioned views about fairness and tax systems. And I think two basic principles, and I don't know whether Ken's here, but he can switch off while I mention these old-fashioned views. But one element of fairness to me is that a dollar is a dollar of income, whether it's a dollar earned through wages or through capital gains, and to have the kind of the differential and the preference for capital gains tax that we've got now is unfair, and just encourages people to channel, those who can, to channel more of their income through capital gains than the income tax structures generally. And secondly, that I think an element of progressivity in the tax system is essential for fairness, and the only real element of progressivity that we have in the income tax system, in the whole tax system, is income tax. And over the years, this has been diminished. I think it's fair to say it's been diminished. Marginal rates have been coming down. GSTs have been put in place, which, if anything, regressive, certainly not progressive, so that there's been some diminution of that progressive element in the tax system, and I think that distracts from a fair system of tax. But thanks for the question, Rory.
Nicholas.
Nick Whitlam, inter alia former banker. Picking up the points about the broad spectrum of risks that banks, authorised banks, that are now undertaking, all with government guarantees on their deposits on the one hand, and on the other hand the concentration of savings that we now see in the big four private banks. And I'm conscious that you have a potential conflict with Members Equity Bank, modest one perhaps. Have you set your mind, have you thought about that proposal which came from a number of commentators with different political perspectives, individual political perspectives, of a new post office bank or a Giro bank?
Yeah, it has been something that comes up in the context of setting business plans and aspirations for, as you say, this modest members' equity bank, and that's all in a context where the four major banks are now writing 90% of housing loans, for example, and that proportion's been going up, and they match that by the proportion of deposits, so almost match that. But the major banks have some obvious advantage by virtue of their size and reputations and so on in raising deposits and so on. But one wonders about, the degree of concentration and whether 90% of a particular market is enough. I think there have been enough murmurings that it is enough, and that ideally might be unwound, but more desirably that there could be effective competition that would over time acquire a larger share. There are no obvious contenders there unless some of the few smaller remaining players were to somehow get together and combine and be more aggressive in competing against the majors. And I think they could make quite a fist of that, because the majors are not the sort of most favoured banks among banking customers, but there's a lot of inertia there, so it'd be a very difficult task. And sort of part of that strand of thinking is the idea of having a post office type bank that would come up, that would have its branch structure in place, that would be favourably supported by the government in some way or another, and would be able to make real impact into the ordinary banking system. But I think these are things that will become a bit clearer, will unravel. There will be some moves in those directions, I think, in time, partly because the public doesn't want to see the majors further increase their share of the banking market, and I don't believe this government does either.